welcome Sanad. So super happy to have you on.
Happy to be here.
Since I told you that I wanted to do this podcast, you're definitely one of the people I wanted to have on because I know we're gonna have a good conversation and hopefully people can take something away from it. Yeah. So thanks for taking the time. I know you have a really busy schedule right now, and especially going forward next couple of months. So thank you so much for being on.
Oh, my pleasure, man. Happy to be here.
Perfect. So just a backstory of Sanad. So it's second year, my first year of computer engineering. I'm walking into the lounge. I see someone cheering on Barcelona, who is my team, and then watching a Champions League game. So that was Sanad. We met then. We started, hanging out at events, doing pool, playing, just hanging out between classes, late nights in the lab. Always would see him, and then we've been close ever since. So yeah, that's kind of our story of where we started. And that's the intro I want to give. I don't want to give your professional intro. I want to give your personal intro. But go ahead and intro yourself, Sanad.
Yeah, I mean, actually, that whole cohort, that whole year was so special. Everyone there, the friendships that formed, and just to hang out in the console room and all the pool table conversations. Yeah, you really can't. It's so easy to reminisce on those days. But at least we're keeping it up. It's hard to keep up with friends post graduation, but I'm glad that we remained close.
Yeah, exactly.
And we have a chance to work together, so it's pretty special. There's really, I don't take myself too seriously. Really, I'm an electrical engineer, so we were under the same department but different programs, I guess. I didn't take the stereotypical hardware route. I went and I specialized in nanotechnology and microsystems. So I did a lot of work on semiconductor devices, synthesizing nanomaterials, very research heavy type projects, so not really co-op friendly. There's also a non-existing job market for that space in Vancouver, but back then I was chasing what interested me more than paying attention. That was mistake number one. Not paying attention to what's really out there. But I'm still very much so interested in that space, and I think there's a massive future in it. And it really borders on the line between electrical engineering and materials engineering. So that was really, really cool. And so I graduated 2015, then started job hunting for a little bit. Almost went into a completely different space, but then I met Arash, who was visiting from Saskatchewan at the time, and he had this proof of concept prototype thing. He was just looking for an electrical engineer to help optimize some designs. Yeah. And I ended up joining a startup late 2015, early 2016. And I've been doing that ever since.
Awesome. Yeah. So tell everyone about VoltSafe, kind of what it is and why it's important. You can start from the basics for people who might not be familiar.
Sure. So VoltSafe really is a new technology that allows us to get rid of prongs. Anytime you want to connect something to high power, you typically see prongs. They could be 2 or 3 or 4 or 5. Could be up to 6 pins depending on the number of phases. So we get rid of the pronged interface. We expose all the metal. It's always off, safe to the touch, waterproof, dustproof, all that good stuff. And it only turns on after the connection occurred. We do a quick check to make sure that we're indeed connected to our plugs, and then we allow the power to flow through. So it's a fundamentally new way of connecting to high power. That's essentially what VoltSafe is. Why is it important? Really can be boiled down to like 3 big pieces. It's smart, it's safe, and it's very simple. That's the tagline on our website. Yeah. Sometimes it sounds basic to me, but I'm like, no matter which way I try to summarize it, that's really what it boils down to. Safe as in it eliminates tripping hazards, arcing and sparking, fire hazards, especially in industrial spaces and homes. 67% of residential fires are triggered by electrical faults. And that's a stat that blew my mind when I saw it, let alone, your average homeowner. They wouldn't know that. So also it's very child safe and friendly. so you don't have to worry about your kids or toddlers sticking things in outlets and so on. So that's the safety part. It's smart, so it functions exactly like a smart plug. You can control it with your phone, set schedules, see how much power your devices are consuming. And the last part, the convenient part, it's because it's magnetic, it's very simple to connect. It's what's called a zero force insertion. You don't need to apply any force to connect the prong plug in. And why that's valuable is like, it's very simple things that you see around the house, trying to plug in your phone charger next to your bed, or connecting your speaker behind the couch. With our connectors, all you'd have to do is dangle the cord and the magnet just pulls it in, guides it in, connects it, and you're ready to go. And also, there's a huge accessibility appeal because we have an aging population, especially in Canada. People have arthritis. They have all sorts of moderate to severe physical disabilities. I think the stat in North America is 30 to 40 million people are affected by that.
Growing too.
And growing. So this type of connector makes it very simple for people that are non-able-bodied. Trying to bend over to connect something that's 12 or 18 inches off the ground, that can be quite challenging. Not to me and you. I mean, my back is starting to give up now, but not to us right now, but to those people for sure, it affects their life big time. And now we have tamper-resistant outlets. So there's plastic flaps that you have to force open.
Super annoying.
And when you came over, you've seen the plug that I have at home.
Yeah.
That dreaded plug in my kitchen that doesn't open up at all. And it feels like it's broken. It's felt like it's broken since I took it out of the box. So with the introduction of tamper-resistant outlets in 2008, 2009, that became harder. And if you look at the evolution of the electrical plug, it was first introduced in the late 1800s when electricity was first brought into our homes. And that was a two-pronged connector. Same design, same two blades, 140 years ago. And then in the 1950s, they introduced the ground pin for safety to ground metallic chassis. And then in 2008, 2009, they made the tamper-resistant outlets. And every jump they've made in safety was at the sacrifice of the user experience. So this is an opportunity to redesign the plug from scratch. That's what we're doing.
Amazing. That's a great intro. And the biggest thing you mentioned kind of at the end is convenience of the usability standpoint. I think sometimes we get complacent in our old ways.
Yeah.
Like we take for granted that we have to go plug in and like put a prong in, and that effort is something we take for granted. When you show someone this more simple, elegant solution, they'll always gravitate towards it. And it's like that, not just, for plugs, but even other ways you might be doing things. And
you've seen it with Apple, right? Like
yes.
Apple brought back the MagSafe connectors on the MacBook. And when they introduced wireless charging, they knew that we need a magnet to center the phone against the charging pad.
Right.
And it opened up all sorts of accessories and room for product innovation and stuff. So, I mean, that's a big indicator. People love magnets.
Yes.
It's very puzzling. It's this invisible force that does things for you.
Yeah.
And you can always count on it. It's very reliable. So, magnets are cool.
Magnets are definitely cool. That alludes to one question I actually get asked often, and I kind of want to hear you answer it, is why is VoltSafe not MagSafe?
Why is VoltSafe not MagSafe?
Like, what's the difference between the two?
Right. So the difference, MagSafe is a charging connector. You're connecting your charger to your battery pack. If you pushed the high voltage that comes out of your mains and your walls, the battery would explode. So there's a big conversion step that happens. So the voltage level is significantly lower, and it's always on. It's waiting to communicate. It's waiting for the laptop or the phone to connect in. Where we differ is that we completely switch the power off, and we wait until that connection has occurred before we allow the power to flow. You can't leave high voltage exposed at the pins, because if people touch it, they could really get hurt and potentially electrocuted. So that's the primary difference between the two. They operate on the DC side, much lower voltage. We're dealing with the higher voltage stuff that's more dangerous to users.
Perfect. Yeah. So I kind of want to ask you about your VoltSafe journey. So you kind of mentioned your start there when AJ told you about getting there, but now that you're, kind of a grizzled vet of the startup world, kind of go through your journey and some of the differences you've had kind of when you first started versus now.
I mean, I was definitely more green then. I knew I liked it. So it was meant to be an interview. He was meant to interview me as a junior electrical engineer that's a new grad to do some design optimization. We met up at a Starbucks like 15 minutes from my house. And we went in, we met up. He had a duffel bag with him. And I thought, like, did this guy just come from the gym? Like, what's going on? We sat down, I got coffee, and then we started talking. And 45 minutes went by and all we talked about was politics because the debates were on. The federal election debates.
Oh, I see.
The Canadian federal election debates were on, and we started talking politics for 45 minutes. And we kind of just like forgot about what we're meant to be discussing. And then he starts talking about all these things, and most of it went over my head. He was talking about certifications and standards and all of that, what they needed to achieve, what stage they were at. And I was trying my best to follow what he was trying to get at. But then he pulled out the prototype. It's 3D printed. It was transparent. You've seen that sample.
Yes, I've seen that. Yeah.
We still have that sample. It's going to go in the Hall of Fame. And in the duffel bag, he also had a side lamp, like the type you have in your bedroom. Yeah. He puts it on the table, connects it, it was at the time called Magno plug, right. Connects the Magno plug in the wall, pairs the two sides, the light went on, disconnected it, touched the pins. And it was very impressive. Like, it was even more clunky at the time, but right. It was very impressive. I'm like, okay, I think I can do this. So I picked it up pretty quickly, and for the first 3 or 4 months, really, we didn't even have an office or anything like that. The lab was set up in my parents' house on my mom's fancy dining table, which got scratched. We had to throw it away after. But literally, I had soldering irons and everything I needed to build PCBs in the house.
Yeah.
And we were placing orders with some suppliers in China, and I was putting it together. And it was a quick learning curve. Like, that's the first thing you notice, is that the high pressure situations happen more frequently. And if you're able to go through these waves, you look back, let's say 6 months pass, and you realize how big and how steep of a learning curve that was. So that was the first thing I noticed, is that I was not on a normal learning curve. I was immediately like sitting down in leadership meetings. I was sitting down with manufacturers. I was getting exposed to all these conversations, and you can't help but think, like, if you were working at a bigger company, let's say you're a new engineer, let's say you're really good and you work on a design, there's going to be 3 or 4 pairs of hands that are going to touch that design before it's ever done. Sometimes it moves so slow that you might even like leave and find another job before that product ever sees
the light of day.
And that none of that happened. Like, I managed to see it all unfurl and happen so quickly. So that was really the mindset that I was at. I was very green, super optimistic. I would make calls about how things would go. Sometimes that's right, most times it was wrong. And then you develop this internal negative feedback loop. And that starts to refine your judgment. So I was the sole engineer for 2 years, and then we went on Dragons then. We auditioned and got the job. And then when we were about to film, we wanted to build a new prototype to show something more impressive. And that's when Tash joined us.
Right.
And I knew Tash from school as well. And we became super, super close friends. So it was just a journey of constant growth, really. And it wasn't until summer 2019, I had a conversation with Trevor, and I told him, I think I'm ready for this, to take on a bigger role in the company and be able to make calls, because I've seen most of the things that you need to see to be able to push a hardware product out there. And Trevor is the kind of mentor that wants to set you up to succeed, not to fail. He's been an amazing mentor and a close friend and really an older brother to me. So it's not something that I did all on my own. So he had a lot of faith in me to be able to do it. And he's like, okay, I've seen a lot of growth from you and a lot of maturity, and I think that you'd be able to take it on. So that's what I've been doing since 2019 now.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Trevor is he's amazing. Like in all aspects.
He's a different breed.
He's definitely a different breed.
Yes.
So you mentioned kind of high pressure situations.
Oh, yeah.
And I think startup life is all about, stories of perseverance and, astuteness at the right time.
Oh yeah.
I know there's a lot of stories that you have.
You've witnessed a lot.
I witnessed a lot of them as well. There's a lot we can't say, but what's one story that kind of sticks out in mind that you can share about?
Don't get me wrong. I wish I could share that story.
later one day.
Yeah, maybe in a future episode when people warm up to it. But a high pressure situation, really I would say the first production cycle for the winter plug.
Right.
That was unbelievable. Because as a startup, you have to balance things out. You have to make promises to your vendors and distributors and customers. We're going to deliver by this date. You make projections. You hope that things go right. You try to pad your timelines.
Yeah.
And then you start to deal with the realities of manufacturing. And then honestly, that whole thing was so transformational for me. I gained a whole new appreciation when I buy consumer electronic products now. I have a whole new appreciation for what these companies do. Really, it's a truly humbling experience.
It's actually, for me, it's both yes and no. When they don't do something right, then I actually fault them more for it nowadays.
Sure.
Especially when it's a larger company and they don't get something right. It's like, I can do it right, so why can't you guys?
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah. But the production cycle, that was unbelievably stressful. But we had a really solid team, and Nazar was also part of the group. I don't think we could have pulled it off without him. He's extremely militant, trying to coordinate shipments of components from Canada, from the US, Europe, and China to procure all the components, make sure they land at the right time, have all the appropriate customs clearances, get it produced, get the firmware on the devices working, test every unit, package it up, ship it, and package it and ship it. And that year, we worked all through Christmas, and you were there, part of the big OTA push.
Yes, yeah.
To get those units out the door. So it was literally, we turned the office into a Christmas workshop to deliver people units during the holidays, like the big sales that we had.
And keep in mind, that was actually also during the pandemic as well.
During the lockdowns.
So,
yeah. Everyone messed up in the heat in a stuffy 1,800 square foot office in Gastown. Yeah.
No, that's definitely, and there's so many like that, right? Like you mentioned the production run, but there's so many small ones like shows and events and pitches.
Oh yeah. At least those are like short term. That was like the most prolonged run of stress to get it done, and obviously certification. That you can go on for hours about that.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So, kind of shifting gears a little bit, because really one of the things that VoltSafe is doing is addressing climate change. Mm-hmm. And so first of all, what are some of the consequences of climate change that people don't talk about? Because there's a lot that people do talk about. What is, electrification? I know that you're very well spoken on what electrification is going to do to the grid. But other things like that you think you see?
It's crazy. Like we posted about it last... I'd hate to be an alarmist. Like I'm not that type.
No, yeah.
But when you see it, it's right now. I think I told you the story just last week. I was visiting my family in LA. They're going through a heat wave, a massive heat wave that spanned 2 or 3 weeks. It's all over the news. They're begging people to switch off loads in their homes because the grid is overloaded. We're seeing electric vehicles roam around.
Yeah.
You see a Tesla or two on every block now,
especially
which is incredible. And every manufacturer now is trying to electrify their fleets, their car lineups and models. And in a single time zone on the West Coast, you can have all these millions of vehicles all plugged into the grid drawing energy at the same time, which is very scary. It's a very scary prospect because our grids were not designed to handle that. And the electric vehicle market and / adoption is happening faster than the infrastructure can change. So demand side management is a crucial thing to do to be able to mitigate these risks in the meantime. Like a lot of the emergency response messages that were sent to people's phones and watches, we're asking them, please switch off non-essential loads between 4 and 9 p.m. Otherwise, you're going to experience rolling blackouts. So it's a big problem. And it's not like I'm making a prediction 5 years from now. It's happening right now. Yeah. We're in this right now. So how VoltSafe can help with that is you have to think of your plugs. So we have taps in our sink. You open them up, you dispense the water that you need, you wash your hands, you close it. If you go to a public space, an airport, etc., for them to be sustainable and not waste water, they have sensor activated taps. You put your hand, the water comes down when you need to wash it. And then when you go away, the tap switches off. Electrical plugs don't do that right now. The normal plugs just stay on, drawing energy. Even if you think your laptop is off, if you leave it in standby mode, it's always drawing vampire power. You have no idea. Right now, the consumer is completely blind to where that energy draw is happening in their home. Like, yes, 40-something% of that goes to your AC, and you can buy a smart thermostat for that. But the remaining 60%, it's all the appliances that you have in your home, and you have no visibility over where that energy is being really used. So you have to think of plugs as the electricity taps in your home, and every single outlet we're building right now integrates power metering in it. It can measure the voltage, the current, the phase angle, and the frequency, and we can use these metrics to identify the energy hotspots in your home. We can correlate it with the region that you're in to try to shift that load at what time you use it in order to help you conserve energy, bring the consumption down. Of course, this is all opt-in. It's not something that we're forcing you to do. You can just see that information if you want. But if you opt in, the value to the utility companies now is that they have consumers that are working with them to protect the grid and avoid having these types of blackouts from occurring. So if I plug in my car, let's say I have a 70% charge, I don't need this to charge to 100% at 3 a.m. Maybe I need it by like 8 a.m. So I can schedule it and say, hey, I want to wait, just have it charged by 8 a.m. And then you can charge it off peak hours and not have to be charged the double rates or whatever if you're doing it during peak consumption hours. So now cars are doing that. Some chargers do that, not all chargers. Some chargers do that, and it's been a very useful feature. But we want to do that across the board for all electrical loads, both on the residential and the industrial side too.
Right. Nice. So one of the things that you're obviously involved in a lot is investor pitches, competitions. So what are some of the things here that have been maybe a little bit frustrating, or things that people should be wary of?
People in general, or like new founders, for example?
Let's say new founders.
Yeah, because the experience really varies
it does
here. And my perspective is more from the hardware side of things. So
hardware is hard. How many times have you heard that?
Hardware is hard. I mean, also we have all the prototyping tools, so it's really not that hard anymore. But if you're a hardware company, it can be quite challenging in Vancouver for sure. And the tough part is that a lot of the investors here seem to either be conditioned or preconditioned, or more heavily favor the SaaS models. You see a lot of software companies scale pretty quickly and raise money successfully. So if you ask them, they'll say, oh, Vancouver's a great place. What are you talking about? But hardware companies don't get as much love. And it's come from experience. Like we started meeting with groups, both family offices, private investors, angel investors. We've started meeting with them since 2018, post Dragon's Den. and we kept seeing the same thing. They either want to just simply know what you're about, but they really have no interest in investing. Those are the time wasters. You see the other type where they'll string you along. They'll say, "Oh, well, let's see how this goes," and then you have, and then they eventually ghost. And then you have the third type. I mean, it's okay. Like if it's not in their wheelhouse, or if they're an investor group that's focused towards a certain space, that's completely understandable. Yeah. But if you do like 2-3 meetings for, like we've had one group, I won't name them.
No, don't.
But the new founders will know who I'm talking about. They've come in, and we've had a series of 2 or 3 meetings. They come from engineering backgrounds, so they're technical guys. They vetted us. They liked what they saw. After the last meeting, you get an email saying, "We're ready to invest. Like, send us the term sheet," and that's it. They just ghost, no responses, no matter how much you email them, whatever. And then you meet them a few months down the line, and you go through that same experience, and they pretend like nothing ever really happened. So you see those groups, they will tend to waste your time. You have to be very careful. And make sure that the portfolio of companies that they have on their website is something that relates to your industry or space. But it can be a challenging space. But we've had an amazing group of investors come on board since our seed stage. So we're very happy and very proud with of the effort and how it went down. And we have a group of amazing brand ambassadors that are helping put the VoltSafe name out there now. So if you keep your head down and keep grinding, you'll find the right groups for you.
Exactly.
But it's definitely not as easy for hardware.
And it's a good point, because unless the investor or the VC is a copacetic fit for you as well, you don't really want to be with them for the long run, because that's a big investment. It is like a relationship of sorts, right? It's like any other relationship.
And the thing is, like, they will also try to undercut you too. Like they'll either try to downgrade or discount the amount of effort that went in and the milestones that you had. Like I'll be very VoltSafe specific. When we first started, it was still obviously in the proof of concept stage. The biggest question is, can this technology be safety certified to UL and CSA standards? That was a big deal.
Yeah.
Whenever we've talked to an investor, they say the same thing. Like, obviously, if you can't get certification, you can't put it on shelves. You can't sell it. People can't insure their cars or their homes because it's an uncertified product. So we agree. Now this becomes an important milestone for your company. You have to achieve that, and that becomes a validation piece. It's like, okay, they're like, keep us in touch, and then when you get it certified, we can have another conversation. So we went out there, we got our safety certification, we battled the standards.
Brutal battle.
We got it tested. It was brutal, but understandable. Like, you don't want to put something and risk people's properties at the end of the day. You want it to be safe.
Yes.
You want it to be better than what's out there already. So we know how important. I mean, safe is in the name of the company, right? So we got the safety certifications. You go out there. That's a major milestone. Now the company is more valid than it was 3 or 4 months ago. And they'll try to talk down that milestone. But I'm like, you're the one that said it. You said, okay, we like the terms. Why are you trying to discount our effort now, But we're not seeing that anymore. I think we've been able to work past all of that. So what I'm trying to say is that you'll see a lot of naysayers and people that will doubt your effort. They'll doubt what you're trying to achieve. And when you do it, you kind of win them over. So you just have to stay focused on the work that matters at the end of the day, and then the rest will come. It will click in place. You won't know how it will come, but it will come. You just have to keep the faith.
Yeah, keep grinding and doing your work. The thing I really like is when there are milestones set, because then if you have a milestone, you go out and achieve it. It really shows your ability and also your commitment to achieving something.
For sure.
I think that speaks volumes to anybody, not even just investors.
For sure. Yeah, and it's a big claim now to say that we're the world's first company to safety certify a magnetic connector for high power. That's a big statement to make. And like, we've received a lot of positive reactions to that when the news came out after we finally got our safety stamp. We knew we were going to get it internally. We knew how good the technology is inside those plug heads. We knew what we were presenting to them. We just needed the compliance engineers they tend to be more on the conservative side. We needed them to look at it from a more open-minded. They just had to be a bit more open-minded.
Yeah. No, cool. And so now I think the engineering team is at 12, 13.
Yeah.
So that growth and your kind of ability to manage a team like this, I was wondering if you can, give some insight onto that.
Yeah.
Because now we started off with probably generalists, and then now it's, very specific. People are very good at what they do.
Yeah.
So that kind of shift and that transition is something I'm really interested in.
Yeah. I wouldn't even call myself a manager. I'm a good people's person. I love working with others. I enjoy the side conversations more than the work itself. Like, I build good relationships with everyone that I work with. That's my key thing.
Right.
And I love doing that, and it makes me feel better about going to work every day. So I think that's like the core of our culture at VoltSafe at the moment. And we want to preserve that for as long as we can, regardless of how large the team grows too. The shift from wearing multiple different hats to like finally having people that are really, really good in their own specific domains, that's been the game changer for us this year. Like, our bandwidth increased just by adding those people. Our bandwidth increased from being able to do like maybe 1 prototype or 2 prototypes to building maybe 8 in parallel that we're gonna hopefully bring to CES next year. And that's amazing, and like we can only get better from there. But as far as managing them, really, a big component to the interview, after validating their technical abilities and seeing their previous experience, if it's more in line with what we're trying to achieve, having previous startup experience is crucial, because the timelines work differently. The pivots happen out of nowhere. It's a more volatile environment, technically speaking.
Yeah.
Things can go wrong at any time, and you have to be quick on your feet. You have to be great at problem solving, and you have to be a little bit strong in your convictions too. Just be willing to like venture into the unknown. Like, you can't be scared of the unknowns. You have to go into it fully knowing that you won't have all the answers. So we look for that typically in every person that joins the team. And right now they all have their a certain maturity level that they bring, regardless of their background. They bring a certain maturity level that allows us to not have to really micromanage much. You bring that person in, you talk about the high level requirements, what you're hoping to achieve. You do it in a conversational way and help people understand the vision of what we're trying to do. Help them literally imagine it in their heads. This is what it should look like. This is how it should work. Mention some user stories, etc. And you have to trust your team members to be able to execute on that and do it. And then, do some refinements after that. So that's key. It's still a work in progress, but we're doing great. I'm super happy with how things are right now.
No, that's great. So what do you look for more when, what are some of the attributes that someone can show you that shows they're a good cultural fit?
They have to be able to take a joke.
Yeah, that's important.
I mean, there's no, in our office space is very open, and we are also very open people. I'm very high on openness, and for that, we in that type of open environment, you build deeper bonds with your team members, and with that comes a personal touch to the work culture. And with that comes because we have such a diverse group, and they come from different countries, they speak different languages, and all of that, they have their own personalities, their own sense of humor, etc. And we try to foster a space where they are very comfortable being themselves. And sometimes it can be taken the wrong way, etc. But you have to be able to accept that person for who they are, and understand that they come from a different background, etc. And if it's a joke, take a joke.
Yeah.
But I know. So on a personal level, it's important. From a technical side, I kind of touched on it briefly. they have to be a really good problem solver. They have to be calm under pressure. And you've seen me how I work too. Like, if I'm questioning something, it might sound harsh or come off as harsh, or the feedback might sound harsh, but I don't really mean it that way. It's not a personal attack on anybody. It's more to open up people's eyes to what I'm trying to achieve with something.
Right.
And I try to do it in a lighthearted manner.
Yeah.
But I operate purely on the basis of truth. I think just give honest feedback. So I don't like two-faced people that like to play office politics. So if you notice, like, it's more been on the personal side than the technical side.
Yeah.
Because I think that is scarier in a startup hiring strategy. That's scarier than hiring someone that can do the job good enough.
100%.
Yeah, they can damage your culture big time and be detrimental to the project.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, that's a great point. What do you see as some of the challenges that you might face hiring going forward? Because now it is a different game, right? Because now it's hard to bring back some of those memories of, the first production run. Yeah. Things are more clean out. Things are more laid out. A lot of things that we might have taken for granted are like folklore tales of the past.
Yeah.
So trying to instill that part of the culture as well is probably an important thing I've seen you try to do.
Yeah.
But regarding that, how can you keep the culture as you hire more and more people?
I think there has to be a certain level of respect to those that joined in when the project was at its riskiest, where like you go in, month out, and you don't know if you can keep the operation going. People that helped you through that automatically slot in at a different tier. And you can only do it by translating these stories and keeping them alive. And it helps new people that join the team, new team members. One, it helps them understand why this person the way they are, what it took, what they had to do to get the company to where it's at. So understanding the company's history to understand where it's going. You have to know what we had to do to get here. And then hopefully that becomes more of an inspiration for them to be part of these stories moving forward. Yeah. So now we're going through the stretch of conferences that are upcoming. Yeah. And you're seeing all the prototypes being built, and it's kind of like a light version of what we had to go through, just with a larger team now. So that's a big. I think that would be a good way to do it. Maybe an employee handbook. Yeah. Or like
we'll have a Netflix show later.
A Netflix show, a chapter for every event that happened. Yeah. Sweet.
So one of the things I want to go into is kind of some trends that you're noticing in the IoT space. I know you're an avid user of IoT devices. What are some of the trends you're seeing, and some of the trends that you think we might see going forward?
Well, the biggest thing that everyone is talking about in IoT right now is the integration of Matter, to be able to completely remove the blockers in the consumer's path. Those listening that have owned smart or own smart products in their home, they know that it requires a lot of research to know what you should buy, what's good and what isn't. And let's say you use Amazon Alexa, like, how do I know if this product is going to work with it? So to establish true automation in your home, you need all these devices to talk to each other. The companies, we saw a big shift in companies trying to lock down the ecosystem to try to win, to more of an open approach, because sales go up across the board if you allow people to pick and choose product lines from different companies. And then it becomes a completely based on merit. Like, these light switches are the best. You can buy them knowing that it will work with LED bulbs that were made by another company. So that's a crucial piece to, I think it's like the final hurdle in the path for IoT adoption. I think that most of the products that you buy off the shelf, people buy them on a usage basis. when it comes to establishing routines in the home, it requires a lot of creativity. Like you have to watch a lot of YouTube videos to get inspired of how people use smart things in their home.
Yeah.
And you can try to implement something cool like that. I do it all the time.
Yeah, I do it as well. It never works as you intend.
No,
Like,
but in the last one I just got was like NFC stickers, and the guy's like, instead of buying fancy light switches, you can just buy NFC tags. Put them behind the faceplate of your light switch.
Oh, nice.
And then you could just tap your phone to be able to switch it off and on. And I thought that was kind of cool. Like it's a cool little hack. And these stickers, you can buy 100 of them for like $10 online. So it requires a lot of creativity. And I think the machine learning algorithms that are being built in the background to understand people's routines, like you saw it maybe in iOS 16, they can tell which apps you use the most at what time in the day. And when you swipe down on your main menu to search, it can kind of predict what you're about to do next. Like you usually text this person at this time, or you open Maps. It will try to make your life better. Like it improves your quality of life. So I think companies have to offer that to the user to make it a little bit less intimidating. Because buying something smart and turning it on and off, like, okay, that was cool maybe in 2011. But right now people expect a lot more of their smart home. I want to be able to wake up and the whole routine just plays out, and the curtains open up and my coffee's being brewed and the kettle is on or whatever, right? So we're seeing that. And then there's also a push towards trying to rent out the hardware instead of full-blown ownership. So it's more making hardware like subscription-based. Right. If you think about it, it's a proven model with our routers. If you subscribe to an internet service provider, you're kind of paying for the hardware, and when your subscription is done, you have to return it or mail it back. So that's a few companies are also starting to do that now.
Sweet. Yeah. So one thing. So going back to the Sanad that we met back in the room back in second year, playing soccer, watching soccer. What are advice you would give that Sanad, like from where you're sitting now?
I don't. It's kind of tough. Luckily, I had like I said, I had good mentors along the way. So there isn't something that specifically sticks out in my mind, but maybe move downtown sooner. I think if I had moved downtown sooner, my life would have been a little bit easier, looking back at it. And I think another big one is, I think I neglected a lot of things on the personal side. I was so happy with how things were progressing at work. I became obsessed, and not like completely unhealthy obsession, but it was definitely an obsession. I was spending 7 days a week in that office, even on the weekend, but that office turned into a social space on the weekends, right? So definitely have a better balance on the personal side. I think I'm having to do a lot of catch up right now,
right?
Especially with my birthday, which I just celebrated a couple weeks ago. You always have these kind of introspective moments, and I think there's a lot of things that I could have done sooner, for sure. But it's okay. It's never too late to do those things, but definitely establish a better work-life balance. And to me, family is important. So you need to know, you need to make sure that the three most important things to you, you're not neglecting one or two of those things while you're trying to make one thing work. Even if you're trying to just put out fires or make sure things stay on track. But it's okay. Like so far so good. No major regrets. Thank goodness.
Good.
Yeah.
Sweet. And so last, do you have any questions for me?
Yes. I mean, I have quite a few, but I don't know where to start. You're much better at linking these questions together. It's been seamless. But I had a few questions for you. One is, where are you hoping to see Honeycomb in the next couple of years? So on the short term, and do you think that you would stay based in Vancouver?
Yeah, two good questions. I'll answer the second one first, actually. I think in the space we're in and with everything being able to be done remote, especially because we're all software, it is easier for us to stay in one place. The access to funding and talent is not as great in Vancouver as some other places. So for that, we might have to go somewhere else. But I think there'll always be an office in Vancouver where we have like a bunch of core events. Yeah.
Sure.
So that's the easier question. The first one of where I see it in the short term, we have built something really great in terms of the ability to predict ingredients and allergens, and there is an absolute need for people with dietary restrictions to find food. It's a big struggle. It's a real struggle for some of these people, and we want to make their lives easier. And the only way to do that is if we have access to large-scale data. Because we can solve it for one person, two people here and there, and we feel good about it, but it doesn't move the needle for us financially, one, and then second, really on a social level for everybody with restrictions, unless we have wide-scale data. So really the next challenge is retrieving that data and being able to process not just data for Vancouver, the restaurants in Yaletown, but really North America-wide first, and then moving on to worldwide. So we want to have access to that data, and that's really going to be the push. And then the byproducts of that are going to be pretty lucrative for us, I think. And that's really the route we're chasing right now. But we do want to make some progress on the user front side as well. So some new innovations to kind of our user-facing apps, or I like to say apps, but really whatever platform people are using at the time in order to find food. It can, right now it's mobile, but maybe it's other things, maybe it's VR, maybe it's assistance. If you're ordering food somewhere, whether that's at a restaurant or grocery store, we want to be the medium that helps you determine what you can eat if you have restrictions.
Right.
So whichever route that is on the user-facing side, will always be on top of that.
There's that Google, the last keynote they had, they were showing that augmented reality camera that would select products off the shelf.
Yeah.
All I could think of is, damn, if you can integrate Honeycomb in there and select for dietary restrictions too, and start eliminating things off the shelf that you cannot buy, that would be a pretty cool addition. I had another actually follow-up to it is, now North America has a pretty uniform cuisine. It varies from region to region a little bit, but we more or less see the same type of food offerings around. In a city like Vancouver, it's a foodie town. You get a large variety.
It's quite good.
So you get a good sample pool here. But I'm wondering, like, if you start looking at other places like Africa, the Middle East, Asia, how difficult would it be to adapt the models that you're building to that, where the ingredient list might be gigantic in comparison? Or maybe there are spices that are not as easily identifiable. Or maybe, like, also, do you see, outside of North America, do you see the food allergies being as problematic? Like, I know in the Middle East, for example, I didn't know that peanut allergy existed until I moved here.
Yeah.
Like, what, people are allergic to peanut butter?
Yeah.
And, like, it's a big deal in schools, and some kids are deathly allergic to it. So I think in the Middle East, like, the mentality of my parents' generation and their parents before them is that it's food, you eat it.
Yeah.
So you learn to eat everything, and you kind of get over that. But I'm curious if you've looked at any of that stuff.
No. So on the language front, we are actively right now trying to push innovations and trying to do other languages. Cool. Our machine learning models and our kind of all of our heuristic models as well work in the English language. So translating that to other languages is a big chore in itself. So that's why I kind of mentioned North America, and then we can do, we have Australia, we do have Australia, but the UK and then any English speaking country we would do first. But the other aspect is cultural. So allergies are not defined global, like to a specific region.
There's no association or something?
There is some genetics there are, like some, for example, people in specific towns are more likely to have. So there are actually some places in the Middle East where there's more restrictions. So I believe that it's actually in Israel. There's a really high degree of people who have Crohn's. So and like more so kind of some of the autoimmune diseases. And in Asia, there's a higher amount of people who have lactose, who are lactose intolerant. So there are subtle regional variations of which allergens and which diets have more or less support, but dietary restrictions are ubiquitous. The cultural side of it is something that does need to be grown on. Here, I think it is a lot more prevalent than it is somewhere else, because here there is a lot of information available. So people are always trying different diets too, like trying to do this and this. And even if you're a little bit allergic, you might avoid the item altogether, whereas you might be living somewhere else and have like an allergy and be fine with it because you don't really feel it. I know one of my good friends, so she's allergic to mangoes.
Mangoes, yeah.
But it's not severe, so she likes mangoes, so she'll still eat it and be like, okay, I'll get maybe
it's
like...
too good not
yeah, it's too good. It is good. One of my favorite fruits. Similarly, there are people who are lactose intolerant that will still have milk in India, China, where, maybe there's also some things that are more taboo to speak about, I have a restriction. And we're very open to people with restrictions here, but that's not always the case everywhere else. And we actually do want to change that. But medically, this population does follow a bell curve like everywhere else.
Right. I have one more.
Go for it.
You're a well-read guy. When it comes to researching topics that are relevant and needed for your work at Honeycomb, the space of nutrition is an ever-evolving thing.
Yes.
There's also a ton of sources. And you even see them preaching on TikTok, like diets that you should do. This is what's best for you. You should try this. You should try that. And at the end of the day, like everyone's body is different, and we process food and all of that differently. How do you make sure that the sources you're pulling from are reputable and can be trusted? Like, how do you know that this is a good place to draw information on nutrition and diets?
Yeah, so for other things, it is easier, right? Because things are peer reviewed. Like if we're looking at something more deeply technical, this nutrition space, which I've had to read a lot of papers on this, like nutrition, diets, it's very interesting, but it is a lot more kind of based on trends than it is based on actual core research. So you have to look into the studies. Like some of these studies, it'll have crazy amount of citations. It'll have people talking about it on TikTok or Instagram or whatever. But when you look at it, it's like, okay, a sample size of 30 done over a year with no other control variables. I saw one recently where they had two diets. They were comparing keto versus like a more like moderate amount of carbs. And then they're like, oh, look, the keto group lost this much weight over this period of time. They didn't mention anything about the activity levels of the individuals during that period of time, which is a key component. You'd
crucial.
Think. There are some more trusted sources that I've found that are a little bit more nuanced and talk about everything else. But you do really have to go in and read the individual paper and know, because even if that source is saying something is good, it might be that they didn't read that paper through thoroughly as well.
Right.
But the thing you mentioned earlier is, we spoke to an influencer before where she gave really good advice, which was like bio-individuality is king when it comes to diets. And I really resonated with that.
What is bio-individuality?
So the concept that your diet and my diets are different, like even if we're the same, even if we're having the exact same food, you'll react to it differently.
Wouldn't that be a pitch? Isn't that the sales pitch to get people to go see a nutritionist?
Yes, it should be. It should be. Because everybody's diet is different. So even if you're following something, it might not work for you. So you really do have to do sort of experiments on yourself and see what you react best with.
Right.
The one thing that I have found from both kind of work and kind of anecdotal evidence from users is if you eat like your cultural family used to eat and maybe adopt some of the foods based on your restriction, that seems to work well for a lot of people.
Really?
So like, historically, for me, we've ate a lot of rice and lentils and things like that. So if you kind of stick to these foods for me, that seems to work well, even though it might be a little bit higher carb.
Yeah.
For people, for more who are of Asian origin, these things like the way steaming things, a lot of this seems to work better.
Like just their body's more acclimated to
it might be that you're just more acclimated to it, and
Right.
you're genetically it's been passed on to you for generations.
Right.
So,
But I don't know, bro. Like for me specifically,
yeah.
I like just seeing my family for 2 or 3 weeks. I put on weight. I'm trying to stay away from my mom's cooking.
Your mom's cooking is too good, but that's a different story.
I'm trying to stay away from that. Like, but yeah, I know. I understand. I understand where you're coming from. That makes a lot of sense. There was one more thing. Do we have time?
Yeah, for sure. Your time.
The other one was you and I talk a lot with Scott, our CFO, about the upcoming generation of engineers specifically. We see a lot of cringe content about developers giving advice to upcoming developers about how to navigate the job space, how to get the job that they want, how to negotiate salary and all of that. I didn't want to get into it earlier, but I really think we should touch on it because we've both been on the hiring circuit lately. And when we see that, you see a lot of just facepalm moments.
Yeah.
Because those kids tend to be a little bit out of touch with the realities of the workspace. Or they come to a startup interview approaching it with the same kind of mentality as interviewing for a larger company. So do you what are your thoughts on that? And I've seen on your accounts recently you've been posting a little bit of content around that too. So what are your thoughts on that? Do you think that Vancouver's falling into that same trend? Are we following the same trends? Are we seeing the same things here? What's the biggest impact you're seeing of the larger corporations moving here? How is that affecting the job market in Vancouver?
Yeah, we are seeing the same trends for sure. With respect to how people are trying to get into the job market, they're treating it the same way. Okay, you do projects, you make your resume, you go on LeetCode, you learn programming, like do problems, and then you interview as if you're interviewing for Amazon or Microsoft or whatever it is, and then you try, and then if it doesn't work, you try that same thing. You titrate down companies until you find one that you like, maybe for compensation. And this is not good for the overall ecosystem, the tech ecosystem of the community as a whole. What you really want is minds who are attracted to pursuing a particular thing and then going after that field. Whether it's maybe you're really passionate about, use the kind of trending thing, but maybe you're very passionate about Web3 and building something decentralized. Go ahead and try and, go really deep into it and try and build something out in that space, and then see, rather than, spending hours and hours on LeetCode, which I do always say is important, right? To know, have your fundamentals down. But after you get to a certain level, it really does need to be about what you want to pursue and what you can show, instead of what you want to, flex on an interview.
Right.
But the compensation, just to add to that,
application focused. I guess that's what you're trying to say. Is don't code for the sake of coding, but try to write something that can be useful or can do a certain function, or it has to serve some.
The other problem here is because the salaries are so high for some of these companies, you are getting a lot of people who are going into the field purely for the money, which is fine, but to be kind of a top software engineer is pretty difficult. It's technically very, very challenging. You have to be always keep up to date on things. And, we know some of these people who are really at the top, and they're built differently. And getting a new grad role and then just kind of cruising there and not being able to level up a lot is frustrating for people.
Right.
So you might get that initial role, but this might actually not be the field for you long term, because it's so easily accessible now that people are just gravitating towards it.
Yeah.
But moving up in it, long term, 20, 30 years down the line, you might not be as fulfilled as you were.
Right. That makes sense.
Yeah.
I mean, I know of a couple people that went down that route and they experienced the exact same thing. We had a long conversation about it too. I'm curious in what can companies do to mitigate that? You're hearing a lot of large corporations putting down hiring freezes, trimming down the fat, cutting entire divisions. Like we talked about it before, they hire hot and heavy.
Yeah.
Across the board, whatever salary the developer asks for, they give them because it's so competitive out there and they want to bring on talent. They kind of let things shake out, and those that don't make the cut got cut out after a while. So that's obviously not healthy. It's not a good way to go about it. It should be a little bit more calibrated. Do you think that it's going to keep swinging back and forth, or will we reach a steady state where people wake up to that fact and choose roles that are really meaningful to them, not necessarily chasing it because my friend or someone that I graduated with just got an offer for 150, 180K, so like now I have to get one too, otherwise I'm not as good of an engineer.
Yeah.
When in reality you can get fulfillment in other ways too. Like yes, the money is nice.
Yeah.
No one's gonna say no to the money.
Yeah.
But usually when you find your passion, the money follows. The money eventually comes. So it's a tough act to balance, especially when you're bombarded with content that say, this is the trajectory of salaries if you stay in one company for 10 years. It's just a straight line. But then this is what you do if you change your position and hop from one company to the next every 2 years.
Yeah.
It just shoots up exponentially.
Yeah, and I'm all for people getting paid. Like,
Yes.
go and get paid.
Yeah,
and
we want to see that, of course.
we wanna
Engineers have been underpaid and underappreciated for so long.
Very long, yeah.
You hide them in the basement, put them behind computer screens. You guys code, never come out.
Yeah.
You see the big product launches. It's all the business and marketing people that take credit for it.
Yeah.
But there's brilliant engineers and developers behind it and designers. So now they're getting the credit that they're due. We also don't want to overshoot that. Like
Yeah, and I think we're at that point now, but I think we will reach a steady state because it doesn't become as profitable to companies.
Sure.
And it's not going to change unless the change comes at the bottom line, where cutting these costs become more profitable long term, and then that's where you'll see them trim the fat a lot more.
Right.
But for now, I think, well, I mean, right now we're in kind of a slump in the market, but for the past 4 or 5 years, it's been just hire like crazy, hire across the board. And then
hire remote.
Hire remote now too.
Yeah.
But I think you're going to see some sort of steady state reached.
Right. Yeah, I hope so. I mean, that's what I want to see.
Yeah.
It certainly gets frustrating. And in startups, it makes you an easy poach target.
Oh yeah.
And it makes it harder to compete for talent in the market space. The other question I have for you is, what can schools do to better educate engineers and developers on the value of being an entrepreneur, the value of owning stock options or shares in a company at a ground level? Because I certainly didn't know anything about that, like zero.
Right.
I knew a balance sheet. We took that econ class in fourth year.
Yeah.
We watched a few Dragon's Den episodes, so we understood how they do company evaluations.
Yeah.
But when it comes to how these things actually work out, and of course it differs from one market to the next, from one space to the next too. But generally speaking, like what can people do to understand it better? How can startups help candidates understand the value of the stock options that they're offered when they enter a contract with the startup?
Yeah, I think we are seeing a little bit more of a shift where people are more willing to go to startups. But for schools, I think you actually want to give more exposure. Like there's lots of classes where guests come in, but usually it's like, guests come in to talk about their like 15-year career or something. Like even if it's a seminar where, maybe every week you have one new startup or like one kind of from locally come through and just talk about what they're doing, what their kind of hiring needs are, what their packages kind of look like.
Yeah.
That would be something that at least inspires one or two people. Because a lot of people go into it knowing. Now, I was fortunate. I actually was very, relative to most people, savvy on what options are, what they constitute of, why you might want to go into a startup, even though it is much riskier.
Yeah.
But a lot of people have no idea. And even to this day, like they might be 3-4 years in and have their cushy job at a big tech company, but they don't know the value of what, options would have been elsewhere.
Yeah.
But that being said, it is risky, obviously, to join a startup. But I think you wouldn't necessarily join just
high risk, high reward.
High risk, high reward.
Yeah, that's the key. You can't ignore the reward part of it.
Yeah.
And even like I've always had that mindset, And my parents are very conservative in terms of their thinking, and in their minds, like when I was job hunting before joining VoltSafe, in their mind, my dad like just would not believe in what we were doing at the time, because he sees it, like he knows it's risky. He's like, you're doing this out of the house, like how is this gonna become a thing? Like, no, it takes patience and it takes a lot of work to get it. But you do get there, and obviously we've had a massive turnaround now. But at the time, my dad's like, no, job sounds way better. Just go do that. And like options on a company that hasn't sold anything, those are worth nothing. I'm like, yes, but you can get a lot of that. And then when it's worth something, you're able to catch up on all the potential savings that you would have made. From making
the other thing,
and the experience, right? Like in my mind, I'm like, even if it doesn't amount to anything, and we close up shop next year, at the very least, I would have had that experience. And it's just very deep, right?
The other thing is like people look at the immediate opportunity cost. Like let's give two scenarios, right? You have a startup, you're in a startup for 4 years versus you're working at say you worked at Amazon for 4 years, you let it fully vest, so you didn't hop around. So you have two scenarios, and then you're both entering the job market at the end of the 4 years. Say the startup didn't work, your opportunity cost lost. You may have lost the amount of money over those 4 years, but now you're immediately more lucrative for other roles that might pay you a lot more than you would have been just being an SD1 or SD2 at Amazon.
Right.
So that's one thing that people don't look at.
Right.
And that should be taught to people.
Yeah, and I've been in touch with a lot of our profs from UBC recently, and they were asking me about these questions because UBC is trying to calibrate now a little bit to the marketplace, and it's changing a little bit. But in my time, especially on the elect side, you were graduating either in a stream that would lead you to consulting. There's a lot of consulting companies here. For the elects, or you go into power, and BC Hydro is a huge employer for that, or you go into silicon validation and you go to Intel. Those were kind of like the three major
three clusters of our peers.
And I remember like any of those companies would do a hiring event at UBC. They bring tons of boxes of pizza and fill up an auditorium. And it just became a pipeline to those spaces. And I talked to the prof about it, and I mentioned it to him. I'm like, there's other options out there. Like, why is the focus only on that? Like, I get it, Vancouver's thriving in those three areas, but it can thrive in other areas as well. And there's a strong underground movement happening. You need to be able to support it too. Even if it trickles down a little bit, it would still be better than nothing.
Agreed.
So
sweet.
Cool.
Awesome. So Nadia, thanks so much again for coming on. It was a great discussion. And I hope soon we'll be back and there'll be more interesting stuff to talk about.
For sure.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.